Well, hello and welcome to the Creative Writing Live podcast, where we talk with writers from all mediums and genres about themselves, their work, and advice they have for writers. I'm your host, Paul Zeidman, and my guest today, oh my gosh, what a resume this guy has. He's been a guest on the show before, and he is author, he is a screenwriter, he is a social media guru. We're not even going to get into the roadmap writer stuff, but it is James Moore, and we're here to talk to him today about his new book, Black Bones Jones, a thrilling. I'm going to let him do all the describing, but James, welcome back to the Creative Writing Life podcast.
Thanks, Paul. It's so good to be here again with you, and really excited about this new book.
Oh, I cannot wait to get into it. It involves a Western, and I love Westerns. Oh, that's so cool. But what viewers and listeners are familiar with, we like to start things off talking about anything we may have read or watched lately. Did we like it? Did we not like it? Or were we kind of like, I don't need to ever see that thing again? I'll go first just to give James a little time to gather his thoughts. So this past weekend, my local movie house, they were showing two classic noir pictures. First was Lady from Shanghai with Orson Welles and Rita Hayworth. Hadn't seen that in like 30 years. I liked
Wow.
it. It was a little slow at parts, but the finale and the Hall of Mirrors, and also it's set here in San Francisco, so I'm partial to it. That was great. And then the next day they were showing Dark Passage, which is a Bogart and Bacall movie. They were
Yeah.
already married by then, and that is also set here. I've seen the building where Lauren Bacall's supposed to live. Wow, I forgot how fantastic that is. It's, if you love a great noir and it's got some, twists and turns and some great character and plot development. I just can't recommend it enough. So Dark Passage. I was talking with my sister yesterday, and told her we're going to go see it. She said, "I don't think I've heard of that one." I said, "If you haven't seen it, go see it because it's great. It's like one of those underrated Bogey and Bacall noirs." But so I'm still catching my breath from the weekend. It was that exciting. James, what
Nice.
about you? Anything on the reading or watching front?
Oh gosh, I finally sat down to watch two horror movies I hadn't seen yet. One was Godzilla minus one,
Oh,
uh,
what'd you think? What'd you
which
think?
wow, so excellent. And what I love most about it is that they brought it back to the original, where
Hmm.
Godzilla himself is not even really the star.
Right.
It's the people, right? And it was such a great and wonderful and refreshing thing to see this character study of these people whose lives had been uprooted not only by war but by this monster, and still somehow managed to hold on to their humanity. That it was the chef's kiss for me. That was the great one. Now the bad one. I did finally see Alien Romulus, and
Okay.
wow, it was it no, no, it I
Okay.
think I think there was room and time to do something wonderful. They had a great premise, a great opportunity with a very, very fresh take that I was really hoping for, and ended up defaulting back to a lot of the stuff that we all know.
Okay.
And
Okay, so I'm gonna agree with you for the most part on both those. Definitely on Godzilla minus one. I've loved it. My thing is that, Godzilla is almost like the shark in Jaws, that
yeah,
it's not about Godzilla, it's about the people. And
exactly.
I'm trying to convince people like they should see this movie because, it's not a Godzilla movie. It's a movie
No,
that just
no,
happens to have this giant radioactive dinosaur in it. And it's all about the
absolutely.
people. As for Alien Romulus, I liked it, but I didn't love it. I agree. I think they had a great premise. I think,
Hmm.
from my opinion, there was just a little too much fan service. That was kind of like, all those things
Yeah,
you liked in
yeah,
Alien and Aliens? Well, we're going to bring that back. And I thought they could have totally not need, they did not need that at all.
none of
But
it.
the rest of it, but parts of it I thought were enjoyable, and I'd give it maybe like a B minus. That's my take on it. Sounds like a little lower for you.
Yeah, I would probably uh I'd give it a B for sure. I'd
Okay.
give it a solid B. But I was so hoping for so much more with it, because the potential that I saw in the way that they opened and what they were doing with it really laid the groundwork for what I thought would have been something really cool and exciting that we hadn't seen before. And the fact that they went back to some of the most obvious tropes were just like,
Hmm.
Really, really disappointing.
Yeah, and a couple of lines of dialogue that they were totally like,
Oh
"Hey,
man.
oh, yeah, that just like that was like, oh, come on, really?" Okay,
Yeah,
so okay, I can't argue that. All right, so let's talk to James Moore, the writer. So you've got, as I said at the beginning, this really wide resume, but you are, at your core, you're a writer, and so I
yeah.
want to I'm going to actually read the bio that is on the back of his new book, Black Bones Jones. Here we go. James Moore, originally from Cleveland, Ohio, and a proud alumnus of the Ohio State University. He's a best-selling author, screenwriter, literary manager, publisher, actor, producer, and director. Whew. He specializes in dark, character-driven horrors and thrillers where the road to hell is paved with good intentions, where the good fight is more than an ideal, and where blood-covered heroes love pancakes. And he had to fit that reference in there somehow. He lives in Los Angeles, enjoys weekends cruising the coast with his wife Anita while searching for the best brunches in Southern California. I can attest to just about everything that is mentioned in here. So, James, let's talk a little bit about you as a writer. I mean, how did you get your start? Were you one of those kids who was like always reading and always writing stuff, or were you kind of like, I don't want to do that, and you kind of came to it a little later in life?
You know what? I honest to God has to say that it started at the very beginning, very early on. I was the quintessential comic book nerd. I was also the Jules Verne, H.G. Wells nerd. I was the kid that would sit and watch um, um, uh, um, the Time Machine like over and over again. So all of the sci-fi and horror classics were all a part of my upbringing. I was the kid that would spend afternoons reading a book rather than going outside and running around because I just found so much enjoyment in those worlds. And when I really started to get into writing was after reading and a story written by Truman Capote
Hmm.
that was an Esquire, and it hit me in such a way that I was just like, yeah, people make a living doing this. I would love to do this. So, novel writing actually was my first love before I became a screenwriter. And so, I've always been fascinated by the fact that you can immerse into these worlds where these that are created by books that completely take you on journeys into places you never would have thought of or would have even imagined those kinds of experiences. And so some of the greatest characters that I've come across have helped shape and mold the characters that I've created in both my literary and screenwriting work.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned H.G. Wells and Jules Verne and Truman Capote. I mean, do you have any authors in particular that, like, as soon as maybe a new author that as soon as they've got a book coming out, you read it, or there's always that comfort food kind of writer, like, oh, I'm not, I just want to feel like digging into, insert name here.
I would say probably the one author that I still do that with is Dennis Lehane.
Okay.
Um, Whenever he comes out with a new book, it's like I don't even need to know what it was about. I just go read it. His first book that I ever picked up was a book called Darkness Take My Hand. And from the title alone, I'm just
Hmm.
like, yeah, I got to go on this journey. I got to figure out what this ride is all about. James Patterson is also another big one for me. I spent one entire summer reading as much Anne Rice stuff as I could
Wow.
get my hands on. So yeah, but Lahane for sure is the number one. Just like I'm going there as soon as he drops the book.
Would you say that maybe the writing style of Dennis Lehane has had a big influence on the way that you write?
It has for sure, because he's got this kind of gritty but sort of down to earth kind of style in his writing that speaks to a very everyman kind of character, but men who've seen the darkness but have a moral code, which I put into a lot of the work that I do.
Sure, sure. Okay, so as you said, you started out writing novels, and you graduated into screenwriting. But today we're here to talk about your book, Black Bones Jones. So, like, give us the elevator pitch. Like, I mean, I love I guess you call it the tagline at the top here: ex-slave, ex-soldier, exorcist. Which, you want to read it as ex-orcist, but that's
Yeah.
not the way the word is pronounced. But so, tell us what this is about.
So literally, that is the elevator pitch. Ex-slave, ex-soldier, exorcist, a Western horror about a man named Black Bones Jones. So Jones himself is kind of a a shaman, if you will, in many respects. He is an exorcist, in the sense that in this time period in the 1860s, there's a lot of evil, a lot of stuff that's roaming around in the world that only he can fight. And so, ironically, this being just after the Civil Wars ended and slavery is no longer a thing, the one man that they have to go to save the world, as it were, is Black Bones Jones.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was really neat is that, as I said, I mean, I love a good Western, but to kind of throw that supernatural element into it,
Hmm.
it's just a unique twist. It's almost like is James Moore taking two genres that he loves and just kind of like smushing them together.
In a way, yes, and I can't even say that I originated it because again, going back to some of the classic horror movies, I remember Billy the Kid versus Dracula
Right, right.
was one of the movies that I grew up on as a kid. And so I did draw on that in a number of westerns. Jones himself is slightly patterned after an homage, if you will, to Sidney Poitier's
Oh,
performance in Buck and the Preacher. A little bit of Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven, um, and a number of his movies, and certainly The Exorcist was one of the biggest, most influential movies on me as growing up in my
hmm.
formative years. That left me terrified,
As it did just about everybody.
right, for quite some time. But at the same time, like when the sequel to Exorcist came out, I was like, I have to see it so I can kind of like complete the circle. In my mind, it was like, you're always going to be afraid until you see this next one, and I was very happy I did.
Okay, I was thinking while I was reading it, I'm sure you're familiar with Bass Reeves, who
Yes,
a lot of African American hero of the West. A lot of people say was the inspiration for the Lone Ranger, and so I
yes.
was wondering, did that that factor into putting the story together as well?
Not in the way that you might think, because when one of the reasons why I created Black Monk's Jones was we were still in sort of like the zeitgeist of the whole superhero genre.
Okay.
And everyone was like, well, we need a black Superman, a black this, a black that. And I'm like, I see where you're going, but why not do something original? And I didn't want to go the route of creating this hero, this superhero that that felt like it would be a knockoff
Hmm.
of the
Okay.
characters, that we're all enjoying right now. And so the first thing I thought was, well, he can't exist in the same universe. And so I either had the choice of putting him further into the future or in the past. And as soon as I had that thought, something about Star Wars came to mind a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. And so I'm like, that's where I got to go. But what I loved about setting it in the Old West is in many ways it's like very fertile ground,
Hmm.
like, very, very much territory that really hasn't been that explored. There's some other authors out there who are doing something similar, but it's not overrun, if you will. It's still like if you've been to a forest near San Francisco, if you've ever looked up at the mountains and saw this wide sweeping vista, that's what it felt like for me. And it's just
Hmm.
like I've got so much to work with here, and I can't wait to really just to dive in. And so it was all of these things combined with the fact that I wanted to not just tell another horror story, but I wanted to actually tell a very rich story itself that was in one part horror, one part tragedy, one part a buddy story
Hmm.
without it sounding very preachy at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. I did want to ask, like, what was the inspiration for the story? Did you have the scenario first, or do you think, okay, I have this character that, I think here's some details that I came up with, and
Mhm.
here's the best situation that he could be in. I mean, what was the process for, I guess, developing the whole story?
So a couple of things came into play in the story development. One was I the probably the most fun that I had was doing the research,
Hmm.
finding out as much as I did about black cowboys. And you had mentioned Bass Reeves earlier, and he was like only the tip of the iceberg. And so many different stories about not only themselves as an institution, but how they basically Black Cowboys basically shaped the landscape and did a lot of the things that we hardly recognize them for. Um, Add to that the amount of research that I did learning about um, African spiritualism
Hmm.
plays a huge part. Part of the story is told in a language called Amharic, which is as old as um, uh, um, I can't remember the name of that language now. But it's one of the what Aramaic. Yes, it's as
Okay.
old as Aramaic. There we go. And so discovering a lot of the symbolism, a lot of the teachings and the philosophies that went along with that really help to shape the character because there's a profound sense of spiritualism
Hmm.
rather than religion that happens throughout the story, and so that had to be an essential part of the character. And then from there, it was really setting up what the world would look like in comparison to our own world, in that you couldn't simply say that these people were good and these people were bad. There was good and bad, in between both peoples, but there were people who had choices. There were people who didn't have choices, and there were people who were sort of like stuck on the line in between, but had to, at some particular point in time, figure out who they wanted to be in this world. And I loved Poole's character is one of my favorite characters because he's not the guy that we think he is, but he's the absolute most essential guy in the story next to Jones because he's our constant reminder that people have a soul,
Hmm.
that that people have a moral compass, and that in the face of something that we don't understand, he doesn't simply react with his guns. He reacts with his knowledge and intellect and reasoning, and his reasoning tells him if something like this is coming to my town, I need to find the one person I know that can stop it, that he believes can stop it.
Yeah,
And
actually, I did have a note about that, that, for the most part, a protagonist is only as strong as their supporting cast. And to me,
Mhm,
that the main supporting character is Sheriff Poole. He's
right,
almost like just shy of being like a co-protagonist, but he does play
yeah,
such a big role in the story. So how was it to develop his character? But also, he has a bit of an arc through the story as well.
he does.
And so, I mean, was that I don't want to ask if it was challenging, but like how was it to have him? Because you also want to have conflict in the story, so that it's not as if he and Jones are contrast to each other, but it's almost like
Right.
they're not mirror images, but it's come to like they're slight variations on the same character almost.
Exactly, exactly. And because racism plays a role in the story itself overall, but it's more hidden within the subtext.
Hmm.
It's not something that I wanted to be like, constantly beating over the reader's face with, this. I wanted there to be some very significant but subtle distinctions. And there's two important moments that happen in the story when that both occur with both Jones and Poole. And the one is when Jones is sitting there reminiscing about his past, and the slavers ride up,
Hmm.
and Poole has to save him, and basically it's like immediately Poole understands the situation and knows what needs to be done in order to save Jones, but the way that Jones takes it, it's like he knows, but at the same time he doesn't feel good about it, right?
Hmm.
And so and so they don't go into this very long explanation as to, you know, why they are the way that they are. But Jones responds simply by telling him, "Ain't on me to condemn you, but it ain't on me to forgive you either."
Right, right. I wanted to ask you that. Okay, so this is like one of the first things I was thinking was that despite the supernatural elements, there's a really strong sense of realism to the whole
Yes,
story, and especially along the racial issues. Now, was it challenging for you because you said you didn't want to get too preachy, but you also didn't want to downplay the racial
right.
issues of the story? Like, was it how was it for you as you were putting the story together to think, okay, did you like maybe come up with a scene or a character and think, okay, that's too much, or like I've got to dial them back a little
Mhm.
bit, or do you think, okay, they're not doing enough, I really have to like crank it up here?
Right. So for me, what really set the tone and everything was the very first time that Poole meets Jones. And I purposely wanted to have him meet him in a setting where he's not actually engaging, but he's seeing and he's
Hmm.
watching what he actually does. And so whatever doubts he may have had initially, the confirmation comes the moment that he sees Jones exorcising the demon out of the woman in the opening chapters. And so where the balance for me came was that Poole himself has recognizes, if you will, that he's like, look, I've benefited from slavery, but it's never been something that I had a choice in.
Hmm.
Whereas Jones, Jones reminds him, it's like, um, what I'm here to do is what I'm called to do. What I don't have to like you or love you, but I have to do what I got to do. So that's his code, if you will. And where both of them sort of like meet quite often in the story is that they understand that they're not doing for either case, for either Jones or Poole, it's not self-serving for either one. It's for someone else. It's for the people of Menifee. It's to unravel this mystery that they ultimately come across, and it's to undo a wrong that they both feel that they have to play a part in setting things right. And so we find in many instances that Jones and Poole are really very much the same person, just two very different characters who exist in this universe where they have to be the kind of men that they have to be in order to survive this particular landscape.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was really interesting and also just really great to see on the page was that both characters, both Jones and Poole, start out, they're pretty established as who they
Hmm.
are, but their interaction with each other, you can see the gradual change and
Yeah,
impact that the other has on each of them. And at the end,
exactly.
they are not totally different, but they're, still kind of the same, but you can see the influence that each of them had
Hmm.
on the other one. And I think was that, part of your plan. Actually, it's kind of a bigger story that when you started writing the story, did you kind of know, okay, I know how it's going to end, or was it kind of like, okay, I got this character, Black Bones Jones, and what can happen to him? It was a kind of, were you outlining like crazy, or was this kind of like, I've had writers on who just total pantsers are like, I'm just going to see where the characters take me. I mean, what was your process for just putting the overall story together?
I did have something of an outline, but the one thing that one of the things I wanted to make sure that I did with this story was that uh, each of the main characters had a moment, and the biggest moment that I wanted to have between Jones and Poole was that at the end of the day, a friendship has been born.
Hmm.
And that's my sort of overarching, theme for the book is that if you take no other lesson from Black Bones Jones, is that people who come from very different walks of life, very different ideals, different, paths in life, can eventually become friends and united for a common cause. So that was really big for me because one of the things that I wanted for Poole to experience, not just seeing how Jones is treated, but to see how he himself has an opportunity to either stand up or not stand up against certain things that he's always been accustomed to. And so when he has these moments where he and Jones kind of like have these little intimate conversations between the two of them, it's his opportunity where he's just saying, I want to learn. I want to know and explore more. I want to know more than what I've been told. And so that's him opening that door. But it's also Jones kind of looking back to Poole going, well, what do you think, Sheriff? It's like, what are we gonna do now? And Poole's just like, ah, damn it. Okay, yeah, I guess we got to do it his way. So those are fun too.
Yeah, actually, so I also was wondering that, talking with all the writers that I have, that as they're developing the story, that of course it's inevitable that you might hit a storyline or a subplot that just goes nowhere, and that you have to
Yeah.
suddenly cut that. And I'm curious, like, did you experience anything like that while you're developing? Like, maybe this happens to Jones, and all of a sudden, and you realize, wait, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And you
Yeah.
had to go back and just, cut, cut, cut.
There were a couple of times that that happened, and for me, it was about creating not only the balance, but I wanted to keep the tension strong throughout the story,
Hmm.
so it would feel like you had to constantly keep the pages turning. And there were one or two scenes that I had originally written that dealt a little more into Jones's past,
Okay.
and were more specifics about how he came to have his powers and his abilities. But then I remembered something very, very important in that this is a horror story, and
Hmm.
we don't need to explain everything in a horror story. In fact, in some of our best horror stories, it's never been explained. Um, and so I said, well, trust your instincts, and not only trusting my instincts, but trust that the reader would get it, would understand and appreciate it, and would just like, let's just keep the story going. Let's just keep moving forward. And so I eliminated, I believe it was three scenes overall, because there's another backstory scene with Poole and his family. But again, it was a thing of like, is this really moving the story forward, or is it just, does it start to feel like filler at that point?
Sure, sure.
Yeah. And I wanted there to be like as few filler moments as possible.
Okay, and I was going to say that we kind of alluded to this earlier, is that your love of the genre, both for the Western and the supernatural horror, that they're really strong in both cases on the page. Now, were there story elements that you wanted to include, and also were there ones that you maybe like, okay, I have to make sure I don't have this kind of thing in here?
One of the things early on in the early development of Jones is that initially I wanted him to have like all of these cool like tools and weapons and things like that.
Okay.
And it felt so schlocky by the end of it that I was just like, okay, I gotta just keep it simple. I got, keep it very, very simple. And this is where I went back to the spiritualism aspect of it,
Hmm.
where it's horror and it's supernatural, but it's also very, very grounded. So the tools that he uses, like the ashes, for one thing, are a specific tool that he uses, when he speaks or tries to exorcise a demon. It's in the ancient language, not in the present language. So stuff like that became more important to the story than saying, "Oh, look, he's got this cool whip," or he's got this cool looking hat, or what, things like that. The only thing that I did keep were the guns, because that's the particular homage to Sidney Poitier, because the guns are called howdahs. They're double barrel pistols, and they're the same kind of guns that Sidney Poitier had in Buck and the Preacher. Only I put a supernatural element to the guns
Sure.
themselves, so
Of
that
course, of
made it
course.
cool.
Yeah, actually, I did want to kind of address that as well because, like I said, I'm a big fan of Westerns. I love historical fiction, and I love when an author incorporates historical accuracy into the story, all the little
Mhm.
details of the world, like, you're building the world around the characters.
Yeah.
So, and I think you kind of addressed this a little bit earlier, but if you could go into some more detail, that did you have to do a lot of research, not really about just the time period, but kind of like about what life was like? And you're talking about, there these
hmm
double-barreled pistols, that were there a lot of things that you found out that you thought, oh, that's going to be a great part of the story, or that's a great detail I
Oh
can
yeah,
add to
yeah.
Jones or Poole. And also, were there things that you found, but you think, oh, I just couldn't find anywhere to put these in?
Right. So probably the biggest thing that I happened to find by accident. I was checking out this documentary on Native American rock stars.
Okay.
And it led me to this guy by the name of Link Ray. And you may not know him by name, but if you've ever seen like Christine, or any of these movies where they have that wow 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 song in it, that's him. That he
Oh,
created
okay.
that. And so in doing this research, it led me to discover a lot of stuff about the Choctaw people, and things that happened during that time, where they were shipping the men of these tribes off to Europe at the same time they were bringing, Africans in from Africa. And one of the historians said, "Well, what do you think happened when you have all of these Choctaw women and these black men coming from Africa? This is what happens." And further research found that a lot of times that slaves hid among some of the indigenous peoples to avoid to escape and avoid slavery, and afterwards vice versa. So there was a great deal of research that sort of unearthed itself, especially with Odessa's character, because I learned that women played a very significant role in the leadership of the Choctaw people. So that became a very essential element in the story, in that she's the leader of these people, and the fact that she's also biracial.
Yeah, and also I really love the fact that you don't really have any female characters in the book that are just, big, screamers and cowards. That,
Oh
you have
God,
you
no.
you
Yeah.
have you have Odessa who's very take charge, and she's kind of like she's like, she's the first to rush to the fight type of character.
Yeah, one of the things that I probably, if I have to be truly proud of, is the fact that I did not make the women in the story secondary characters.
Hmm.
They had their own agency and power, especially with Odessa, but also I believe her name was Mary, who Jones rescued her and her daughter, who comes in much later in the book when the fight breaks out, and she's just like throwing shotguns and blowing people. Yeah, I'm just like, let her have her moment. But even with um the crazy lady in town. I I wanted the entire scope of everything that's going on in this community to ultimately come back to her, because even though it seems like she's playing such an insignificant role, her character represents true healing in the story. And
Hmm.
and so and so I wanted to give her her moment where she has that reconciliation, not just with her own personal history, but with a dear friend that she loved so much that she never forgot.
Yeah, I cannot, and I mean, I know that we mentioned this before that you also have worked as a screenwriter, that you can kind of see that quality of storytelling evident
Mhm.
in the novel, because even a lot of the characters, even very small characters only in a couple of scenes, each of them has a story and an arc, that
Right.
there's something that changes about them over the course of it. Uh, that I totally forgot about that character who was like kind of like the backbone of the town, and
Hmm.
that how that incorporates into it, and that all of the that there's no character that is just off by themselves. Everyone is
Right.
incorporated somehow. They're connected to Jones, or they're connected to Poole, or they're connected to the town officials, but they have a lot of interactions. And I like, again, I think that goes back to, I'm guessing, your experience with telling a screenplay,
Hmm.
because you have everything that's kind of interconnected, and all those subplots that are somehow tied together.
Right. And what's interesting was that Black Bones Jones started out as a screenplay before it became a novel.
Hmm.
So I'd already had the screenplay already written, and so it was just really creating and really enriching some of those moments and nuances to make an even stronger and tighter story. And so it became a much different experience writing the book, because we only have but so many pages in screenwriting,
Right.
and we have to be sort of really clear, very sharp. And I got to really be very expressive in certain points throughout the story, where I really wanted the reader to get the full weight and the benefit of what was happening in a lot of those scenes. So it was a very, very enjoyable experience.
No, normally I would ask that you started out writing novels and then went to screenplays and now back to a novel. Because I guess for me, I mean, I started out writing novels, but I haven't worked on anything like that in gosh knows how long. So it's all about, writing in a screenplay format. So
Right.
how hard was it for you to take your screenplay, and now you're able to, I can talk about what the character is thinking or why they're
Yeah.
doing something, all those things you're not supposed to put in a screenplay. So how was it for you to, I guess, make that, I don't know, transition back to from screenplays to novels?
So it was interesting because I initially, and this is what I did wrong. This is the one thing that I did wrong. I initially went into writing the novel the same way that I would write a
Wow.
screenplay. And that hurt me at first because it wasn't really happening on the page, right?
Hmm.
I still had those same rules and everything in my head. And so what I had to do is I had to step away from it and think of it like think of writing a screenplay like riding a motorcycle, like riding a Harley, right? You jump on, you know you're about to go really really fast. You're just rolling down the highway, right? But then change it up, and when you're riding a novel, you're not riding a Harley. You're cruising down the interstate in a Corvette.
Okay.
Now you and I both know that like anytime we get to cruise the coast, that's not a fast drive. It's right because
Right.
we want to have that experience of
You want to take it all
driving.
in.
Yeah, listening to the music and seeing the sights, whether it's the ocean or the mountains, it's just like I'm creating this movie in my head just by taking this drive. And so it's much more purposeful. It's a little slower, but it's also very clear and definitive in terms of your creative eye of what you're seeing because you're spending that much more time just really absorbing and feeling everything you need to feel in that moment because that's the same thing you want your characters to feel, the same thing you want your readers to feel. And so when I changed vehicles, if you will, and
Hmm.
went from riding like I'm on a Harley to riding like I'm in that Corvette, it was such a completely different process. And even more, I'll say even more enjoyable because I already knew where I was going, but now I could really take a moment to take in the sights, take in, make the little detours and whatnot,
Hmm.
and know that they're just adding much more richness to the story itself overall.
Just enjoying the overall journey, not worrying about where you're going.
Exactly,
Oh.
exactly. Because I already knew where I was going with it. Now,
Hmm.
now I really get to enjoy the journey, really get to bring in things that maybe I hadn't even thought about since the day that I first came up with the character. Did I really want to make sure I put in this book?
Sure, sure. So, okay, so again, the book is Black Bones Jones. So, I mean, the book came out a couple of weeks ago. How has it been reception, or how's the reception been? Have people just said, "Hey, we want more"? Like, when's the further adventures of Black Bones Jones coming out?
So I've already had people hitting me up about when's the second one coming out. It did great in its opening week. We sold like 100 copies in 10 days.
Fantastic.
Still growing. But I'm also because you mentioned this earlier about transitioning between screenwriting and novel writing. I'm also using this as kind of like a business model for all
Hmm.
of us screenwriters, because the one thing that we know that is still king in the industry right now is IP,
Right.
and so if you actually own your IP, you have greater leverage in this business. Now, one thing that's changed, and it's a significant change that most people either don't know about or don't talk about, is that at some point, self-publishing used to be a dirty word in the business. If you self-publish it, oh man, that no one wanted to read you, so you just decided to throw it out there and make us just like deal with your trash. No, that's no longer the case. It's so no longer the case that there are like um, 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 bestsellers now that have self-published, sold 1 million books, and so the two keys here is that one, it gives you an opportunity to directly engage with your audience. And if you can directly engage with your audience can be anywhere around the world now. Thank you, internet. But also it puts you in front of and makes other people aware of you that would not otherwise be aware of you. I've already had a number of inquiries from producers who are interested in Black Bones Jones as a project. Now again, it had been out there for a couple of years as a screenplay, and then nothing.
Hmm.
But now that it's a book, everyone's like, "Oh well, yeah, let's have a meeting. Let's talk." So, I want to be able to demonstrate a model for other screenwriters who have great material, have wonderful content, but don't seem to be able to either break in or find a way in to just say, "Look, create your own IP."
Hmm.
And set yourself up so that no matter what happens, you always benefit from your content. The world is going to benefit by the fact that you created it. But if you're, in whatever that looks like, you're benefiting from your content, and now you've got that legacy that will go on for God knows how long. Because one of the things that I've discovered from Black Bones Jones is that we're not just stopping with the book.
Hmm.
So up next is going to be the audiobook, and following that is going to be the graphic novel and whatever takes place from there. Um, but now I have something that's a highly marketable property, um, easy to talk about in 30 seconds or less.
Hmm.
That people get it. That's very clearly defined, and that I can use that to help me move to the next level. But even if the next level takes me the next 3 to 5 years, still within those 3 to 5 years, I'm going to be selling books.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I'm still going to be selling stuff. I'm still going to be marketing it and still getting in front of a lot of places. I've got a friend of mine who's on TikTok with a quarter of a million people following. She wants to do a live reading um,
Wow.
of the book. So, when you start thinking of the business aspect of it, this is what I want other writers to know that is available to them, other than just sitting waiting for someone else's permission for you to be absolutely great.
Yeah, one of the things I always at the end of the interview is I always ask the authors like, what advice do you have for writers? But you just summed it up personally, or summed it up perfectly. Create your own IP, create that
Yeah,
business model, and also I think the most important thing is you don't wait around for someone else to say yes. Just go out, and start making it yourself, and do it because you enjoy doing it. Also, but also not because you think, okay, this is my
right,
shortcut to a house in the hills and
right,
and a big luxury car. It's about,
exactly,
you're doing it because you love it. And I've always said that you can tell when an author or a writer loves what they're working on because you can see that enjoyment on the page. And sounds like
absolutely.
that is definitely the case for the book Black Bones Jones, written by our guest James Moore. James, this has been fantastic, but it's always great to talk to you to begin with. Where can people find out more, not just about you and Black Bones Jones, but about all of the great things that you offer to writers?
So you can go to my website at onemore.com. That's ONEMOORER.com. There you'll find everything about me, James Moore, the author, about our publishing company, Dark Anthem Press, which does genre, horror, sci-fi, thriller, mystery, gothic noir. If you've got IP that you want to get published, come seek us out. We are not a vanity press. You never have to pay us to publish your book. And that was a big thing for me. I wanted to be one of the legit real deals. On the representation side, you can also find us at OM2, which is our literary management company, where we're managing authors and screenwriters. And eventually, we're going to also be offering, starting in January, screenwriting services to help screenwriters get the tools and everything that they need. And also in January, as if I don't have enough on my plate already, um, we're launching One Anthem, which is going to be more of our general fiction and nonfiction arm of our publishing division, and doing some great things there. So yeah, we want to be the full service company of the future.
Okay, that is fantastic stuff. So the website is onemoorer.com, just like his last name, onemoorer.com. The book, again, Black Bones Jones by James Moore. You can get it at his website. You can get it on Amazon. It's a really exciting read if you like westerns, if you like supernatural horror. What's also nice, nothing too gory, because I'm not a big fan of that. But and also it's a fast read. It is really a page turner, and it's not a tome, which is good, but it's
Right.
a really enjoyable read. And the holidays are coming up, and if you've got a reader, on your gift list, definitely you can't go wrong with that. James, once again, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure, sir. And thanks for having me again, Paul.
Oh, of course, of course. Viewers and listeners, if you enjoyed today's show, please hit like and feel free to leave a comment and subscribe. We'll go down the social media list kind of quickly. My screenwriting blog, MaximumZ.blog, still on Twitter for the time being, at Maximum_Z. And this show has its own account at Podcast CWL, and it is at Pez Screenwriting. Those are my initials. That's on Blue Sky and on Instagram. And James Scott's books, I got books too. My Go Ahead and Ask books, those ones about screenwriting and pie, those are on Amazon. Like I said, that's James. I'm Paul. This has been the Creative Writing Life podcast. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Most importantly, go write something.